Hi, I'm Jack Hopkins. I'm the son-in-law of Ruth Bolliger, and this is a tape of some conversations that we had starting in October of 2017 and lasting through the end of November of 2017. And the conversations center around some of the history of Ruth's family and her experiences living in Kansas and Oregon and some of her early family life. And it finishes with a little show and tell of some things that Ruth has brought to our home since she moved in August of this year. And this is Ruth's Christmas present, and my Christmas present to the Bolliger family. So enjoy. Okay, Ruth, just start by telling a little bit about your family before you were born, what you know about them.
Well, my grandparents came to Kansas, and they were living in Illinois, but they had started the Wheelers, started out in New York, and somebody thought they were sailors on the Mayflower and liked the country and then stayed. I don't know how much truth there is to that, but that's what I was told. There's a Sergeant Newkirk married a Wheeler, and he was in the Revolutionary War. So I guess my family could be DARs if they wanted to. And then Grandma's family, all it says about them was Iowa. They came from Iowa. And on my mother's side, her grandfather was born in the Netherlands. And he fell in love with a dairymaid, and his dad wanted him to marry the rich widow next door so they could have all her land too. And when he refused, Grandpa disowned him, so he married my grandma, and they came to America, where he was going to make a success of himself and show them. And Grandma was born in Newkirk, New Jersey, right after they got over here on the boat. And I heard that one of the children was buried at sea. I don't know who that was, died on the boat. And I guess that's evidently there was land for cheap in Kansas, so they came to Kansas and settled. I think they had 160 acres. And one grandpa, he just had to improve his land, but the Wheeler grandpa had to, it was a timber claim, and he had to build trees on it, because Kansas was pretty treeless.
Where was that they were, Ruth?
Western Kansas.
You know where exactly, or?
In Norton County.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad was born there in 1902 in a sod house, which is built in the bank, and the front is wood, but the bedrooms are built in the back, and sometimes a rattlesnake would drop on the bed. So I've heard lots of snake stories of those who lived in dugouts. One grandma put boiling water on the bed, a pan of boiling water, and a net on the ceiling, and I guess the snakes dropped in the net, and then she killed them. Not a nice way to live.
And tell me about your parents. How did they meet then?
Uh, they met in normal school. Mother was born in Iowa, and her parents divorced when she was 8. They were living in Montana, and Grandma had married and had 2 children, and her husband went to Colorado to try to, I think, make a strike or something, and anyway, he got typhoid fever and died. And Grandpa Davis's 3rd wife died when they had their 3rd child. And the grandparents took the baby, but Grandpa Davis took the boys to raise. And so when he and grandmother met, it was strictly a marriage of convenience. So his kids would have a mother and her kids would have a father, some support. But he was a wanderlust, and he wanted to go to Canada. And so they took off for Canada, and Mom was just a little girl, and they went through Montana, and did go to Canada and live for a while, but grandmother had terrible allergies up there, so they moved back to Montana. And Grandpa worked on the big ditch, they called it. I'm not sure what it was. But she was a very strict lady and didn't believe in dancing and fun and anything. And the people, I think it was the Indians, wanted to celebrate when that ditch was built. And they had a dance and they wanted to honor him, and Grandma wasn't going to have anything to do with that, you know. And so anyway, she was a very good housekeeper and very neat and picky. And she had been carving, or she just got her house cleaned, and her grandpa had to fix something on the churn, something wood. And he got wood shavings on the floor, and she fussed about it. And she had a knife in her hand and she dropped it. And he accused her of trying to attack him with that knife. And she went and picked up that knife, and there was a knothole in the door. And she threw that knife 3 times at that knothole and hit it, and said, if I had wanted to, you know, kill you, I would have. And she grabbed Mother and the youngest boy, Jeff, and they left and went back to Kansas. And Mother remembers crying all the ways to Great Falls, Montana. She was 8 years old. And with money and things, and Grandpa eventually went back to Iowa, but you know, they never saw one another. They wrote letters. But I was telling Jack that I just didn't realize how hard divorce was on children, especially in that era, where it just wasn't common at all. So Grandma moved to Norton, Kansas, and Mom, no, she moved to Iowa first. And Mom, she went to work as soon as she was 13 or 14 in that Branda store in Omaha. And Mom's job was making flowers for the horses' bridles. And she worked there until I think one of Grandma's relatives got sick, and they went back to Kansas to see him or something. And Mom went to normal school there and taught school, even though she didn't have even a high school education yet, but she was well-read and smart. And so they moved to Kansas, and Mom met Dad at normal school.
Where was the normal school, Ruth?
In Norton.
In Norton.
Kansas. And they both got hired for a teaching job, and Dad taught 2 or 3 years, and then the pay was pretty bad, and so he went to work for Standard Oil about the time I was due, and they moved him to Logan, Kansas, and that's where I was born, in Logan. But after a year or two there, he decided he wanted to go back to teaching, so they taught the rest of the time until Dad moved to Oregon, and then he went to work in the flour mill with Uncle Floyd, and Mom kept teaching.
So tell me about their life when they were teaching in Kansas. Where did they live?
Well, there was this little town of Ornoke. I don't even think it's anymore. And it just had a few houses and 2 big long sidewalks. And the school was a 2-room schoolhouse. Mom taught the first 4 grades and Dad the next 4. And we always walked, you know, to school. And Dad had an old Model T Ford that you had to crank. That's the first car I remember. And then they got I don't know what kind it would be, a little sedan-like thing. And Uncle Jess had a car with a rumble seat, and I thought that was great.
So what were your earliest memories? Were they in Ornoke?
Probably. My earliest memory is they were teaching in Norton County, not Ornoke, and an old maid named Rella Crank was watching me in the daytime. And her old father, he was real old, would sit on the front porch, and his hands were so deformed. And I'd go out there and stand in front of the rocking chair and rub his hands. And childlike curiosity, you know, I finally asked him what happened, and he said he was in the Civil War and got hung by his thumbs in Andersonville prison. And that stuck in my mind. Oh, you know, I guess my first idea of how horrible war could be.
Tell me that story you heard about when you were a little child. Was that in Ornoke as a toddler?
Oh, my grandparents had a farm about a mile out of Ornoke, and then Uncle Fred's farm was next. And I was at my grandparents', and they couldn't find me. So they went looking for me, and Uncle Jess saw me in the back of the hog house. I'd gotten in the pen with the hogs, and they had little A-shaped hog houses. And I was in the back of that hog house holding a baby pig in my lap. And Uncle Jess said he just sweat blood to get me out of there, because if that pig had squealed, that Mama Sal would have eaten me up.
So tell me some other memories you have of Ornoke and what you did there, or any stories that you can tell me.
Well, there was one real poor family, lots of children, and not clean. You know, their clothes were dirty, and one of them didn't have a toothbrush, and I remember the school nurse asking Lucille how she cleaned her teeth, and she just took a rag and wiped them. That was her toothbrush. But anyway, we started going to Oregon in the summers early, because Dad had worked all summer for a farmer, and Dad and Mom only made $45 a month. And the farmer couldn't pay him, so Aunt Anna had married Uncle Floyd and moved to Oregon and told him to come out there because there was seasonal work. So we started going to Oregon every summer when I was 7 or 8, and I forgot what I was talking about.
I asked you about just what other memories you had of Orono.
Oh, anyway, we'd put up a lot of fruit and bed, and bring it back, a trailer full of food. And then the cannery started letting them bring their food to the cannery when the season was over, and they'd can them, And the cost was minimal compared to doing all the work yourself and all the jars. But Mom would put her initials on the cans and Anna's initials on cans so we could tell them apart. And then somebody got in our house in Orono and took some of our fruit. So I think I had just been introduced to a little girl detective named Nancy Drew, and my friend and I decided we were going to find out who took those fruits. And then Orono didn't have electricity, so we had an old-fashioned ice box. And we finally went to this house of these poor people, and my friend diverted them while I peeked in their icebox lid, and there was a little jar that said CDW on it, Clara D. Wheeler. So we solved the problem of who took our fruit, and they needed it bad, so folks never did anything about it.
Tell me about your house there in Orono.
Well, I think it was our cousin Bertha's house, and Bertha had that disease that ran in Grandpa. Two of Grandpa's brothers married two sisters, and they had the disease that Woody Guthrie died of. And it made you jerk and twitch and things like that. And she no longer could live in that house, so we moved into Bertha's house and lived there until we moved into what's called the bank house just about a year, but I think Bertha sold her house just about a year before we went to Oregon for good.
But what was the house like? Can you tell me about the house?
Well, it must have had 3 bedrooms because it did have. John and my bedroom and my folks' bedroom was side by side, and then there was a little room right off the kitchen that I slept in. Had a bed and stuff. It was a 1-story. Had a huge cotton tree out in the yard.
What did you like to do? Where did you like to play when you were in Orono and you were a little girl?
Well, we liked to walk the barrel. We'd get a barrel and get it out in the street and get on it. And it took, when I was 60 years old, when I was up at Nancy's, it was my birthday, and there was a barrel there, and I think she got a picture of me. I could still walk the barrel. And then they played a lot of cards and hide and seek, and my favorite game at school was Andy Over. I just loved that game. Half of the kids would get on one side of the schoolhouse and half on the other, and you'd throw the ball and yell Andy Over, and if someone didn't catch it, they had to throw it back, but if they caught it, they'd sneak around and hit the ball with you, hit you with the ball, and you were on their side then. So, but I love that game.
Sounds like you got into a few pranks when you guys were kids too. Tell me, can you think of any kind of trouble you got into when you were younger?
Oh, I was always getting into trouble. we'd go out and walk on the railroad tracks. And you had to be careful because the train came through about once a day, you know. And the folks didn't like me doing that. And then I can't, well, you know, we ran off from school that time.
Well,
Okay, the seniors, the high school all went to Norton, but seniors in Norton had a sneak day, and that sounded like so much fun that we asked Dad if we could have a sneak day.
How old were you then when that happened?
I was probably 9 or 10, and he said, yes, you can sneak home for lunch and sneak right back to school. But instead, about 5 of us didn't go back to school, and we went down on the creek. And the creek was icy, and these boys got on the ice and were having fun. So I was the only girl that got on the ice, and the weight of the 3 of us, I guess, was too much, and it broke. And the boys grabbed a tree limb. They were taller. And I grabbed one, and the boy knocked me down. He was panicky. But I happened to, thanks be to God, just break ice till it got strong enough I could crawl on it. And then we got out on the bank, and when the girls heard me scream, they all ran back home and were afraid to tell their folks what happened or where I was. So when supper came and none of the kids showed up, except those ones that went home, why, folks started going door to door to ask if anybody knew anything, and one little girl told my mother she heard me scream, and then she ran. She heard the ice break, she heard me scream, and then she ran. Well, we went to this lady, kind of a fancy lady, and we didn't think we could go to her house all wet and frozen, so we walked another mile to Aunt Ides, as we called her. She wasn't a relative, but she was just a lovely little old woman, and she took us in, and she took my clothes off of me. We were about frozen, and rubbed me till I was warm, and then put me in one of her big old flannel nightgowns. Oh, that felt so good. And then she fixed hot potato soup for us. And I've always loved potato soup since then. And I don't think they had a telephone, and her husband then walked up and called the folks that Alfred and Jimmy and I were safe there. And the folks came and got me, and all of the people on the way there were going to whip their kids when they got them home. But I was the only one that got a whipping, and I was the only one that didn't get a cold. So, hi, baby. Well, my dad had a little basketball team. And we went to Norton to play basketball, and a new boy had moved into town. His folks had a little market there, mostly meat, and he got cold. And I mean, we didn't know him very well, or he was an older boy, but he got cold and told Dad he was cold. So Dad gave him his overcoat to put on. And the car keys were in the overhaul pocket. And so Bob disappeared with our car. And so anyway, Dad had to call home and, you know, say they were stranded in Norton, and we looked, but the boy ran the car into a snowbank, is what finally happened. And I don't know why they didn't maybe Dad didn't want to report him or anything, why they didn't punish him more. But then he got John and some of the other boys in that store and was just terrorizing him. And John climbed in where the meat was, you know, in that glass thing, and hid there till Bob ran his rant. And I think they took him away after that. But that was a scary thing too, for John anyway. And John and my closet interjoined. You could go from John's closet and walk into mine. And he got something wrong with his feet and had to be on crutches. And I like to listen to a scary show called Inner Sanctum. And after I listened to that one time, John took the crutch and reached in and rattled the hangers and scared me so bad that I got punished and couldn't watch Inner Sanctum anymore. I was so mad at John over that, you know. But anyway, that's life in Roanoke.
Okay, now you can talk.
Dad planned programs, you know, and was kind of an MC on those Friday night things we had every Friday night with local talent. And one time it was a big doings. Why, I was in the first grade, and he had John sing, "When I wore my father's brown derby," and then I would sing, "And I wore my mother's blue gown," and then John would go, "You took my hand as we strolled up and down," and we'd both sing, "The happiest, craziest kids in the town, when I wore my father's brown derby," and then I would go, "And I wore my mother's blue gown." And Dad was so proud. I wish we could. Shirley Temple and I are the same age, and you know, I think he wished for another Shirley Temple.
That's very cute. That's a very cute story. So were you in Roanoke when you had that little talent? Where was that?
I think we were still in that little house Dad built, because I was first grade with Mom when Mom was teaching up by the Ankenmans. And, on Halloween, it was common to upset outhouses. So my grandma would go out and sit in hers all Halloween evening, and if anybody comes, she'd make weird noises and scare them away. So her toilet never got tipped over, but a lot of people's toilet did. I don't know why that was the thing to do on Halloween, but...
Did you ever go tip out houses on Halloween?
I didn't tip over any. And one time they moved the outhouse at my aunt's, and Grandpa stepped in the old space instead of the new, and up to about his calves of his legs. And we washed and washed and washed those shoes, and Grandpa didn't want to throw them away, but Grandma got them off the clothesline and burned them up. And Grandpa was very upset over burning it, because shoes were an expensive item in those days. Snakes were something you had to look for in the outhouse, and they had made a little box that held the Sears and Roebuck's catalogs. And that was our toilet paper. And one of my jobs was to tear out sheets of toilet paper and wad them up and stretch them out and wad them up and stretch them out so they'd be soft enough for Grandma. And I reached in there one day to get some pages out of the catalog, and a snake was in there. I guess it was a garden snake, I don't know, but it scared me so bad that I always looked 2 or 3 times before I reached in that box again. And Emily was so surprised when I went to an outing with her on, it was in Michigan, you know, with all kinds of animals and bugs and stuff. And she was so surprised because I knew what a black widow spider was. But you used to go in the toilet, reach down and look and make sure some black widow spider wasn't hiding under the seat. Because one man got something bitten that was very important to him.
What other jobs did you have in Oronoque? Do you remember having any chores or anything that you had to do there?
Oh, dishes and things like that. Just trash and stuff. But everybody had a chore in the house, you know. And you had an outdoor toilet, so you had to empty the pot. Well, this girl and her mom moved to Oronoque, and there was a lady on the corner named Mrs. Amy, and she was old and ill and needed somebody to stay with her. So Arlene and her mother moved into that house, and Arlene's mother had lived there years ago. Arlene's mother had left her daddy, so that's another.
Who was Arlene?
She was just a friend that moved into Oronoque.
Okay.
And we got to be real good friends. And so Ona, her mother, met her old boyfriend Harry, and he'd been widowed, and they got married. And there was a lady in the next town that had had her eye on Harry for quite a while. And she just went nuts when she found out he was married. And Arlene's house and mine were just across the road, so we were up in a tree talking in my yard looking, and this lady drove up into her, and her dad had just one little room where he had bologna and stuff you could buy, and he had a knife there to cut the bologna. And this woman charged in there, and Arlene and I could look right in the window and see. And she grabbed him by the suspenders and took that knife and cut those suspenders in two. So here was Harry trying to hold his overalls up and trying to protect himself against her, you know. So we thought we'd go save the day. How dumb. So we gets out of the tree and runs over there, and when she sees us, she gets in the car and starts chasing us in that car. And we ran into a ditch and jumped over a fence that I don't think I could ever jump over again. But she missed us, but that was a scary time.
How old were you when you did that?
Oh, about 10, 11.
Did your mom or dad ever find out about that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And what happened to that lady?
We called her Old Lady Woods, which wasn't nice, but I don't think anybody ever arrested her or anything. I don't know.
So tell me how you came to go ahead and move on to Oregon and how old were you when that happened?
Well, Dad had gone out there and decided the one summer I didn't go, Dad had gone out there with John and another cousin, I think. They'd go out there and work in the fruit all summer or something. And so Mom, by that was when the Oronoque schools closed, so Mom got hired to teach in a little town called Clayton. And I don't know whether I should tell this or not. But anyway, Dad stayed in Oregon, and she thought she should finish out the year because she'd signed that contract. And the county superintendent came one night and I was staying with a family and babysitting a chiropractor's family in Norton, so I could I just started high school, go to high school there, because I'd skipped a grade, you know, and stuff. And anyway, he got a little smart with her, and Mom cried and called Dad, and we were on the road to Oregon that week. So.
You'd skipped a grade. I'd not heard the story of that.
Well, I could read and everything when I started to school, so Dad didn't think I could, so I read Gingerbread Boy to him backwards to prove I could read it. And by the time first grade was over, I'd learned in a one-room schoolhouse or two-room like that, you learn a lot from the other classes. See their work on the board and stuff.
So you went on to Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And where did you first live there?
We stayed with Aunt Anna, and then the folks got an apartment over the mayor's house in Freewater. And we lived there till they bought the house they lived in the rest of their life out there. In No Man's Land, it was called. It was just right outside the city limits, and later it was incorporated into the city. Freewater's supposed to have said to have 11 bars. I don't think it did, and Milton 10 churches. And during the war, everybody came. I don't know what the law was in Washington. We were just 12 miles from the Washington line. But the soldiers that were doing all that training in Walla Walla would come down to the bars there. And Mother picked up a drunk soldier one time. Her school was 4 miles out of town. And she was always, you know, wanting to give him a ride. So because she wanted someone to give my brother a ride. Because he was in the Marines. And so she picked this soldier up, and he was drunk, and she started scolding him like a mother. What would your mother think? And going on. And he got on a crying jag and was going, I want my mama, I want my mama. And she had a hard time getting him out of the car. That's the last she picked up, I think.
So the war must have started pretty soon, a year or two after you moved to Milton Freewater, is that right?
No, well, I was in Norton on when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
So it was right after that. Before we got out there before they did where you couldn't get any gas, only so many gallons of gas a month and everything.
Mm-hmm. So the rest of your teenage years, your young, that was just all during wartime, right? Mm-hmm. Tell me some of your memories about that.
Well, when you lived on the West Coast, you had to have blackout lines and everything because they had sighted a Japanese airplane right off the coast. So we were kind of spooky about it. And then while I had a lot of Japanese stores and everything in it, and people weren't nice. They broke out the windows in the store, and they took the people off to some kind of camp. I'm not sure what it was, but you know, where they took them, and what would you call something like that?
It was an internment camp.
Internment camp, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. What are some of your other memories about that time?
Well, the Japanese also took over the place where all our rubber came from, and suddenly you didn't have rubber for your underwear. They started making some women's underpanties with legs and a waist that buttoned. And they had a funeral, and this woman got up to view the corpse up there by the casket, and her button came off and her panties came down around her ankle. And that was the talk of the town for a while.
Where did you go to school there?
Mac High. And it's right, the Oregon Trail went right through there. Right in front of the school, the old Oregon Trail.
Who were some of your friends there, and what did you guys like to do when you were in high school?
Well, music. You know, I was in band, and I had trouble singing alto, but I loved to sing, so they let me be in the choir. And then the school dances and the Patriot. We couldn't get school rings when we were seniors because of they needed the medal for the war. I graduated in '44, and the war wasn't over till almost a year later.
Tell me, and you worked for a while. Did you work before you graduated in the cannery? Tell me about your experiences working.
Well, as soon as we were old enough, they needed us. They hadn't had any Mexicans up there or anything, you know, and then they took all of our young men for soldiers, so they brought in Mexicans to work in the canneries. And they also brought in some German war prisoners. And I got a rash, you know, and felt bad. And I worked from 7 at night till 7 in the morning. And they had put me down on the steamers because so many of these German troops were from the crack German troops in North Africa. You know, the
Rommel's troops.
Yeah, Rommel's troops. And one guy had put in a can, "I am Kurt, I am your friend," and some of the girls were just going crazy over him. But I was so patriotic that wasn't a temptation to me. So they put me down on the steamer, and the steamer is where they fill the peas and put lids on the cans and stuff. And I had gone to the nurse, and she thought it was a pea rash. A lot of people got a rash from working on the belt with the peas. But she thought I should go to the doctor. And so I walked out of there about 8 at night, and you could just go to the doctor's house not far away and ring a bell. And they had the Germans, the guards had walked down to the other end of the row, and the German soldiers were wetting down the grounds so the dust wouldn't blow and stuff. And one raised the hose and got me just completely soaked. And Oregon has cool evenings. And I got on my bike and went to Dr. Flowers, and he said I had the red measles. So I went on home. By the time I got home, I was chilled and sick as a dog. And I was in bed for a week or two with that. And
how old were you when that happened?
17. I
So-
got out of school at 17.
So this was right when you had gotten out of school. Any other experiences you can remember? Tell me about the time that you got where you went with that boy to the scary movie.
Oh, and this, I went with a boy called Lorne Inslee, and the parsonage of his church was right next to our school. And the minister was a bachelor, and Lorne and him are just such good friends, and Lorne had dragged me over there after school all the time to ask questions about, I like to dance, and Lorne's church thought it was wrong. So he asked Reverend Green, you know, is it anything in the Bible against smoking? And Reverend Green would say no, but who wants to go with girl that smells like a camel. And then about dancing, he said, can Ruth be a Christian and still dance? And Reverend Green said, yes, but she has her feet in the world, things like that. He was a good influence on us and fun, you know. And I forgot what you asked me now.
About that time that you were...
Oh, anyway, there was a spooky movie on, and we went to it, and we had to walk because gas was rationed and you couldn't use the car for unnecessary things. And we took a shortcut that had a path that only one could walk on it. The other one had to walk behind. And it was full of trees and kind of scary. And the head mills of the flour mill were there too. It was kind of a... And he was carrying on and looking over his shoulder and all. And I was teasing him. And then I mocked him and looked over my shoulder just as the moon came out from a cloud, and a guy came out from behind a tree with a hatchet and started chasing us. And I screamed, and thank God he didn't leave me there. He grabbed my hand and we ran, and we got clear up on this old wooden bridge. And then he got to thinking maybe I was teasing him. He turned around and started to say, were you teasing me? And these clump, clump, clump came on the bridge behind us, and I started screaming again. And it was about a block on home, and I screamed all the way home up to the front door. Mother met me at the door. Rather than asking what was wrong and everything, she's just trying to shush me because the guy next door had a bad heart. She's afraid I was going to kill him. But anyway, it turned out that fella had, that we think it was, everybody thought it was, had a bad dementia or something, and had thought he should sacrifice his child like Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac. And he'd been in the insane asylum in Pendleton. And he got out and he was all right for a little bit, and then he got this goat. And a neighbor complained about goat. And I don't know whether it was a criticism that set him off or not, but the second time the neighbor criticized, he took a shovel and beat that goat to death and then buried it and never took the chain that went from the clothesline to the goat off. It just went straight in the ground. And it was that night that this happened, and so they thought that, they always thought it was, his first name was Luther. I think his last name was James, but I don't think I would have named Jim James if it had been. I don't remember. My memory's too foggy on that.
I just want to know if there's any other times you've been chased in your life, because it sounds like you've gotten chased a whole bunch.
Because what?
Because you've been chased a whole bunch in your life.
Well, that old lady Woods chasing us in her car.
With the car, yeah, exactly.
That sounds good. You want to tell that story about the windmill?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Well, I climbed up on this windmill and I was going to sit on the platform. And I got to the top step and had my hands on the platform, and the step broke and I fell backwards. It had rained, thank God. The ground was real soft, but it just knocked all the air out of me. And Mom and Aunt Sookie were saying, "Are you all right, all right?" And I couldn't get a voice. I couldn't. It was 15 minutes before I could talk and be understood. But I wasn't seriously hurt, thank God. But it gave me a fear of falling.
And you've always had that ever since, maybe. How old were you when that happened?
Well, that was another 9 or 10, maybe 8.
When you were in, and so you were in Oronoque.
Yeah, I was out at Grandpa's farm.
So, and you've had other travels. This is going back to Orinoco when you were a kid. Tell me some other places you remember traveling when you were a kid. We're going to talk about San Francisco.
Well, the folks didn't have much money, so each time we went back and forth to Oregon, they tried to take a little detour so we could see some different things. And they went by San Francisco and then up to Oregon. And I had terrible adenoids, finally had them out at 15, so I was a mouth breather, and John was ashamed of me, go around with my mouth open. And then I would get all just absorbed in what I was seeing and not aware of anything that was going on around me. And I woke up and I was on the Golden Gate Bridge, and I couldn't find my folks or John. And I don't know whether he was a policeman or, but he had a uniform.
How did you get to the Golden Gate Bridge?
We drove to it.
Okay.
And then got out and walked around.
And you'd fallen asleep or something like that, or you were talking about mouth breathing and.
Well, when I was awake,
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry.
I looked like an idiot going around with my mouth open.
Okay, never mind.
And anyway, I got kind of upset because I couldn't find anybody. Not only that, I couldn't find them, but that I'd be in trouble because I got away from them. But this nice policeman told me that if they couldn't find my folks, he would take me to his home and I could be his little girl. He had children too. And he stayed with me till my folks found me. Very upset.
And were they upset with you?
Yes.
So that's always a traumatic experience for a young child, is getting lost or anything like
But
that.
it took away my fear of policemen.
I'll bet. Do you remember any other trips that you took as a young child?
Well, going to Yellowstone, and then we went up into Canada and saw Mother's half-sister and half-brother, things like that. And we went down to Utah one time, and they were racing cars. And I remember one car had gone so fast that it blew a hole in his fender. I don't know what that was, but it was some kind of a test in racing where they went real fast. Well, Melton was full of churches and Freewater was full of bars, they said. And I don't remember but about 2 of them, but there was a pastime. And it was right on Main Street, and the soldiers would come and get drunk in there. And Mother felt it was her patriotic duty to pick up a soldier and bring him somewhere. She picked up a drunk soldier, and so she had to scold him and tell him, what would your mother think if she could see you this way and stuff. And he got on a crying jag. I want my mama, I want my mama. He was calling her mama and different things. And she taught school 4 miles out of town, and she would come in, and Dad would wait on the corner for her. They just had one car. And so she got to the corner and just left Dad standing there and went on to the pastime, but he could see what was going on. Let that soldier out, and I don't think she picked up any more of them.
Ruth, let's go on to what your memories are of and some stories about what you did after you graduated from high school. And did you graduate in Milton Freewater?
Mm-hmm.
And what happened after that?
Well, the old Oregon Trail went right in front of my high school, and a lot of history there. But when I got out of high school, I went back to Kansas to visit, and then I came back and went into nurses training in La Grande, and we would work. We would go to school so many hours a day and then go to the hospital so many hours, 2 hours a day. And they had amputated one woman's leg, and I'd go to the hospital and rub her back and get her ready for bed, and then I'd go to microbiology lab and cut her leg up. Gave me the willies. But we took a lot of credits. They had more credits, 18 hours, I think, a semester. And so we had to we had an 8 o'clock curfew where the other college co-eds had at 10 o'clock. And so one girl was going to stay out later, and she decided she would whistle and we could let her in without her getting caught. Well, the time came and she didn't whistle and she didn't whistle. So finally I went down to the door, and she was standing there, but she was so scared she'd lost her pucker. But we got her in and didn't get caught. And then we were taking a course in psychology, and I got something stuck in a bottom drawer, and we just had a lesson on hallucinations and stuff. And I got that drawer out and could see them pulling their drawer out on the other side. So I got a yardstick, and I would make their drawer come out. And Sue was from Kentucky, and she would say, "My drawer, I saw it move. I know it did." We had a good time with that for a while, till Willina got smart enough to come and check and see if we were doing something for inside. And then I slept so sound that they just couldn't get over how I could sleep through anything. So one night they came, and so many got on one side of my little mattress and one on the other. We had bunk beds. Carried me down to the janitor's closet and left me there. And I didn't wake up till morning, and there I was amid the mops and brooms. And they didn't have very many. All they had was 20-some boys there that didn't pass the test to get in the Army. And so we didn't have much of a social life, you know. Is that it?
No, it's okay.
Okay. But we had a lot of studying to do, and we had just a lot of fun playing tricks on one another and things like that. And my birthday came in April, and everybody was pretty broke. But I came back to my room, and there was packages and everything. I opened them, and they had emptied my drawers and wrapped my things up. So I had a birthday present, even if it was my own stuff. And then the girls got into a thing, because some of them had boyfriends overseas, and Willina's husband was there and everything, and they got an awful old Ouija board and would ask it questions if their and they had some kind of a thing where you'd sit around the table and you could get it to come up a little, and it was crazy, you know, but they would ask you where their men were and if they were safe and everything, and so the Catholic girl there in the dorm and I went to her priest and asked her about it, and he told us to have nothing to do with it. But I could see how that could catch your fascination.
So how long were you at that school, Ruth?
A year. And then I was sent to the Dalles for more nurses training.
Where was that?
The Dalles, Oregon.
Okay.
It's right on the Columbia River. And then I had to have my appendix out. And after I had my appendix out, I got to fainting, and I fainted one day on the steps in the hospital. And they diagnosed me as epilepsy and turned me loose.
Did you really have epilepsy? You sounds like you just had fainting problem then.
No, they found out, well, this went on for a while where, you know, nobody trusted me to drive or anything. It was crazy. I'd just get to feeling crazy and black out a little. And finally I had met Helen then, and she became my sister-in-law, and she had a little boy. And she was walking me down the street in Walla Walla, and I fainted in front of a doctor's office. And she dragged me in there, and the doctor said it's one of three things: either that Munchausen where you make yourself sick, but I had and still got a little scar, a little mark there where I hit my chin so hard. He said usually those kind of people don't hurt themselves, you know, or I forget what the other two was, or well, the other one was low blood sugar. And they tested me, and it was out of my system in an hour and a half when it should have taken 5. So they got that regulated, and I got fine.
So it was during that time that you worked for a doctor, Ruth?
Well, I went back to Kansas to visit, and this doctor's wife got sick. It was a local doctor in Lenora, Kansas, a little old town. And he told me if I would work for him till she got well, he would find out what was wrong with me. And he's the one that did that. And it was very interesting. I lived in their house with him, and he delivered babies in the home. And one 5-month fetus, I guess you call it, we just left it on the table there because he said you had to bury him after 5 months old. I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, the parents called about 5 in the morning that the little baby was making noises. So they got it to the hospital, but it didn't make it. And then we had a lady with a breech birth, and that's why I don't smoke, because she, in a breech birth, the doctor explained to me you have to get the baby out in 7 minutes or there'll be brain damage. And she was just wild. This was a home delivery, and she kicked him clear into the wall. And anyway, we finally got the baby delivered, and it was all right. But before she asked if it was all right or if it was a boy or girl, she had to have her cigarette. And that just turned me off of a cigarette, because if anything that's more important than your baby didn't make sense.
What other stories do you have of with him? How long were you working for that doctor then?
3 months, about 3 months, and then she got better, and I went back to Oregon.
What did you do then after you got released from nurses training?
Well, I worked for, as I said, I went back to Kansas and worked for him for a while, and then I got back to Oregon, and the dentist, what would his girl be called?
A dental assistant?
She
maybe?
was taking 3 months schooling on it, and so I worked for him while she did that. Got her schooling, and I kept planning to try to go back into training, and then my husband got home from overseas, and he wasn't my husband then.
So that brings up, how did you meet Daryl?
Well, Daryl was a Kansas boy, and we all ran together in a crowd in Kansas, and I was the youngest. And I remember that some of the older kids would play a game called Post Office. And you had somebody come in, you had them come in, and if they wanted a stamp, you stamped on their foot, or if you did, or a package was a kiss. And John got Daryl in, and I think he paid me $0.25 if I'd give him a letter, I think, which was a kiss on the cheek. I forgot maybe a package was a kiss on the mouth, a letter was a kiss on the cheek, because Daryl was so terribly shy. So I kissed him on the cheek when I was 12 years old. And he and my brother were best friends.
So you kept in contact?
Yeah, I
with
wrote him all through the war. That was the patriotic thing to do.
So he got back from the war, and then how long after that did you get married? Yeah.
Well, we got engaged, and then we went to 65 miles one night, and all he said was, "We've made the wrong turn, we're in Allison." And I thought, I can't be married to a man that doesn't talk any more than that. And on the 25th of July, I broke our engagement. And Daryl's mother said he was so unhappy, she was afraid he was going to harm himself, something. But then John, bless his heart, went to airline school and went to work for the airlines. And it stopped in Topeka one time, and John brought Daryl to the plane. And then they just hired me because I was under 21 for the summer. And so they laid me off till I'd need more in the fall there. And so anyway, then Daryl, John and Helen went to this dance at this place and took us along, and Daryl danced with me, but he held me about a foot from him, saying, "I do not intend to get involved with you again," through clenched teeth. And then he kept holding me a little closer the more we danced, and a little closer. And then we were married 2 months later, and the airlines wouldn't let you work there if you were married then. So
that took care of that as well. So you got married, and where did you live at first?
Well, with everybody coming back from the war, Daryl had 2 years of college, and there was a GI Bill, and the GIs wanted to go to college and take advantage of that. It paid $90 a month. And so the only thing we could find was a motel. They didn't get it finished in the summer. And our first 2 or 3 months was in that motel, and hot plate for our stove and stuff, you know. And then this Ethel and Glenn Prentice had a house with a basement, and they'd build a bedroom in each corner and planned to rent it to college boys. But they were very religious persons, and the first college boys they had were too noisy and stuff for them. So they decided to rent it to us, and it worked out fine because by that time I was pregnant with Jim, and Daryl could go on one corner of the basement and study, and the kitchen was in the other corner, and I could stay in the other corner and not bother him while he was studying. And so we got $90 a month from the government, and our rent was $50 a month. So we had to scrimp. I remember we went out and picked up rotten apples and stuff. But we did okay.
And where did you live at that time?
Manhattan, Kansas. Daryl went to K-State.
Right. Can you think of any, and where did y'all go after that, after he finished his degree?
They sent us to Hayes, Kansas.
All right, we're going to jump forward now, and you maybe you could tell some stories. I know that probably your kids and grandkids would love to have some stories about Jim and Randy and Nancy and then Karen when they were kids, and some interesting stories about that. So that's kind of the direction we're going now.
Well, Jim was easy to, you tell him something, you tell him to leave our records alone, and he would, you know. And Randy would play with his records and then hit his hand, spank his hand, and pull ours out on the floor. And Jim was serious, you know, and he was always interested in mechanical things. And he'd get a screwdriver and walk around and say, I want to screw something, I want to screw something. And then I told you the story about how we kept having a flat tire. And finally the man next door was writing a book and home all day and told Daryl that Jim would unscrew the, what is it, the valve to the, and sit there and smile as the air came out of the tire, and then screw it back on. So we were never the wiser. And I always felt like kind of a bad mother because my kids got hurt or drank something they shouldn't have. But Jim was riding his trike with a stick in his mouth, and the trike tipped over and the stick went through his soft palate. And oh, he was miserable, and I was guilt-ridden. I should have not let him do that, you know, didn't even think about it. And let's see. Oh, I told you about when Randy had his first haircut.
Well, tell me about that. Tell about that story. Yeah.
And Randy had his first haircut. Now I was standing there holding his, trying to help the barber and hold his hand, and the men in the barber shop began to giggle. And I looked around, and Jim thought the spittoon was a potty. pulled down his pants and sat down on it. So I insisted Daryl take the boys for haircuts after that. And then Randy, I don't know, he was just, our neighbor had an old washing machine, and it had a hose that came up and hooked on the left, and you filled it by hand, and then, and Randy twice, she had it on her porch, twice let all the water out of her washing machine. She had a little boy about Randy's age, and he just didn't seem to learn from and be horrified by what he'd done. He just kind of thought it was fun. And a friend came over with her little boy, and she stayed all night, and she thought that her little boy had a fever. He was Randy's age. And she asked if I had any baby aspirin. And so I got a brand new bottle and set it down by her and went on doing something else, and looked, and Randy had gotten the baby aspirin and was under the table and had eaten them all. So I jumped in the car and left baby Nancy and Jim with her, and was taking Randy to the hospital. And Daryl happened to pass us, and he told the guy in the car with him, something's wrong, only one head's bobbing. So he turned around and followed me to the hospital. And they did pump Randy's stomach, and Daryl would tell him, Randy, you're an oil well, you're an oil well. And Randy bawled, I don't want to be an oil well. But they had to pump his stomach. And let's see about Nancy. She played with a little boy named Willie, and they were climbing a tree in our backyard. And he came running in the house screaming, Nancy, Nancy, Nancy. And I went out there, and she was sort of standing at the base of the tree and leaning, and her hair really was just straight up. And there was a electric wire that had sunk down in that tree, and the limbs had rubbed the insulation off of it. And as she was climbing, she grabbed that wire and burned her all across here. And the doctor showed me how she had spots where it went in and spots where it went across her chest, I guess. But he thought as she fell through the tree and hit those limbs, it worked kind of like, what would you call it? CPR or something. The bump, would keep her breathing. And we were 2 blocks from the doctor, and I rushed her into the doctor. He treated her burns, and, that was a real scary time. And then she seemed like she ate something she shouldn't have too. I can't think of it right.
Tell me how Jim and Randy and Nancy got along with one another.
Well, Jim and Randy were always good buddies, but Nancy was the fly in the ointment. They would tease her, and she'd get very upset at them, but I didn't know how to really, I think she was a little more sensitive, I think she reacted a little more than I thought she should for what they done. It wasn't that bad.
Tell me some of the other kind of pranks that they did over the years. Can you think of any other pranks that they did over the years or trouble they got into?
Well, no, Randy, we lived on one corner, and the Halliburton was Daryl's bitter enemy because they were our competition in oil well work. And he would go by they lived on one corner and we lived on the other of the block, you know, right straight down the block. And the guy was a wife beater, kind of, you know. And so they sent the police, but they came to our house rather than the Halliburton house. And we were trying to tell them that we weren't fighting, it wasn't us, out on the porch of the police, you know. And they didn't, you could tell they didn't believe us, and just in that house on the end, the door opened and he chased her out on the porch, hitting her. So the police ran up there, but Daryl would stick his tongue out and go bleh when he went by their house. And one day I saw Randy with a knife going up the alley. What are you doing? He was going to do something mean to those people that Daddy didn't like. So Jim was painfully shy, and when we'd moved to a new place, he'd get Randy by the arm and push Randy ahead. Randy soon grew taller than Jim, so they were about, you know, I mean, they looked the same age, and he'd push Randy ahead of him, and Randy would have to meet the new people in church and introduce them and stuff.
How about when they got to be teenagers? Were they a lot of trouble for you when they were teenagers?
Well, not really, but Jim was so shy, and he had 3 dates, and he lost 5 pounds before each date. So he told me he was going to have to give up women because they weren't good for his health. And Randy was very popular in high school, and he and his friends were all a lot of fun. And there was a story that Mrs. Irvine's, there was an Irvine Park there, and that her ghost came out at midnight. So Randy and Gary planned that they would hide behind a rock with sheets on them, and Don would bring Don, or I don't remember whether it was Don or Gary, but anyway, would bring the girls out there, 2 girls, Barb and I can't remember the other girl, and the boys would scare them, which they did. And they came home and just laughed and rolled on the floor and thought that was so funny. But they didn't realize they'd laid in poison oak or poison ivy while they waiting to do that. So that little prank cost us $30 in a doctor's visit. So Jim was on his, I think it was on his graduation day, he went out on a bike, somebody's motorcycle or something. Anyway, they had a wreck, and he was so bruised and he could hardly walk up to get his diploma. He's sore, you know, but that was another scary time. So, and I remember Nancy being the only girl invited to an all-boys birthday party. And the game they played was chicken, where somebody get on somebody's back and try to knock the other person off. And when I went to pick her up, that's what she was doing. She was on some boy's back. And Karen, we tried to be more careful with her, but Nancy drank some medicine. That's what she did. And my neighbor came as I was carrying in groceries and got to talking to me, and I was standing there holding a sack of groceries, and I'd taken a sack in, and I had some medicine in there for the kids. It was pinworm medicine, and when Daryl's mother told me about that, I didn't believe people had stuff like that. But down in the valley, I think everybody had some kind of... Anyway, Nancy came out of the house with that liquid bottle almost empty. So she had to have her stomach pumped too. And then Karen drank bleach and had to have her stomach pumped. And the kids, the boys, and especially tried to make a clown out of her. And on Halloween, they'd have her go up to people and say, "I want to suck your blood." They would have her copy the different presidential candidates. Karen be Lyndon Johnson. She'd go, "Quit your pussyfooting around." Karen be Richard Nixon. "I am not a crook." There was something else she did. Some other one, but I can't remember what it is right now. But she was a good little kid, and Randy had to have a chicken for a college psychology course and show how it could get attached to something. And his first chicken didn't, but the second chicken, he hung one of Karen's toys in the box and it would swing, and the chicken would get under that like it was its mama and roost. And that chicken grew, and Karen named it Linda. And she would walk around and Linda would be on her head sometimes. And they made quite a pair, Karen and Linda. So when we got transferred to Tulsa, they had some law chicken thing, and we couldn't take Linda with us. So close to Karen's school was a farm with chickens, and Karen, on her own, asked the farmer's wife if she would take Linda, and she said she would be happy to take Linda. And I was on Grandpa's farm quite a bit, but I was pretty dumb about things, So anyway, we took Linda over there, and the rooster came and started attacking her, and Karen and I were both crying and screaming. And the farmer came and said to his wife, "What's the matter?" And she said, "Our rooster has just fallen violently in love with Linda." Then I realized what was happening. But we left Linda in California and came back to Tulsa. Left the 3 kids on the porch and had Karen, and that was, as Daryl said, the hardest move he ever had to make, going off and leaving those kids. Nancy just graduated from high school, and Jim and Randy were in college.
Tell me, do you have any other memories of pets that the kids or you had when you were a kid? Do you remember any other pets that you had? I'm just curious if you know any others. If you don't, that's okay. Can you think of pets
I had a dog I just loved, and
what was your dog's name?
Joe. And took it out to Grandpa's, and he found it sucking eggs, and he took his rifle and took it over the hill, and oh, that was so hard to forgive, you know. I mean, I wish now, but you know, they said it's habits you can't break to dogs from doing. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they believed. And in those days, some of their income came from the milk, cream, and eggs they took to town on Saturdays. So, and then we didn't have pets at first when the kids were little, because Jim seemed to be born with allergies. And then when he was, I guess he would be about first, second grade, why this dog came to our place. And they told us that there was the kids just thought that dog was wonderful. She was black. They named her Spooky because she was black. And so we took her to a farmer that wouldn't promise not to kill her, just, you know. And the kids cried for 3 days, and on the morning of the 4th day, she was back on our back porch. So we kept her, and Jim seemed to get along all right, only he still has a bad allergy to cats. We had one cat for a while, but it wouldn't move with us.
So Spooky was the dog for when Jim and Randy and Nancy were little. Then you had Spooky for a while.
Well, till she died, and Karen. After Karen was born, you know, we still had her, and we never had a baby and a little one around animals, so we didn't know they copied their habits. And Jim would come home from high school, and Spooky would lay on her back, and Jim would rub her stomach, and then Karen would lay on her back, and he had to rub her stomach. And I noticed Karen licking the wood on her playpen like the dog did. So.
What other pets do you remember? Did Karen get a pet then later on when she was older?
Yeah, we had another pet, and we called her Marker because we got her from the Marquarts and, you know, something else. But she got hit by a car, but she had a pup. She had pups first. And one of her pups was Pierre that we kept, and Pierre lived to be an old dog. He lived till after Daryl died. He was a cockapoo, I guess. Mm-hmm. And the kids always thought, I was feeding him one day when he was a puppy, and he was eating one day when he was a puppy, and I came and he rolled over on his back for me to love him, and he choked on some food in his mouth, and we thought we'd lost him. And the kids always said he was brain damaged from that, but he just was a love dog from then on. If I ironed, he was under the ironing board. If I washed dishes, he was by the sink, you know, and he just, but he was a nice old dog.
Go ahead.
When my sister-in-law Helen had her baby, she just didn't get well afterwards, and they took her to some hospital in Kansas City to figure out what was wrong. And I took Johnny, their baby, who's 2 months younger than Randy. Randy was born February 5th, and Johnny was born on April 1st. So I had these 2 babies in the house, and Jim would be about 3
Where were you living then?
in Hays, Kansas. And it rained. Grandpa came down and stayed to kind of help me with the 2 babies, you know. And he came in and said, you ought to look outside at the water. And I went to the door, and as I did, it came up on the porch. And I turned and ran toward the bedroom, and it was coming out of the kitchen. And so I knew we were, and in order to get, they had 2 apartments upstairs, and we lived in 2 downstairs. And the only way to the upstairs was through an outside staircase. And so I waded about waist deep and got everybody upstairs, you know. And then a boat came later, and I handed Randy to the guy. He was 3 months, and I handed Jim to the guy, and I turned around to get Johnny, and the boat took off. And I was screaming, where are you going? Because Randy was breastfed, had no bottle, no nothing, you know. And they said to a church. And then I heard a boat had tipped over with a baby in it, so I was so frantic. And Grandpa and Johnny were safe upstairs there, and a road grader came by, and I had to wade waist deep to get to the road grader. And then I went to the place where they said the kids were, and they weren't there. And I just lost it, started crying, and some nun grabbed me, and she had this real starched white collar or whatever it is, and I remember bawling on her. And she was very kind. And then it came on the radio that the Bolliger children were safe at the Art Rogers place, which was Daryl's boss. And so when the water went down a little, they took me there, and Catherine Rogers had put sugar in a dish towel and tied a knot in it, and Randy was sucking on that, and that was how they kept him happy till I got there.
That's quite a story. That's one I'd never heard before, Ruth, at all.
Randy started out not making good grades, and they wanted to put him in a higher level class. And I didn't think he should be in it because he wasn't doing the best in school. And the teacher told me he's smart as a whip, and I'm not going to let him get by with this. So they put him in a advanced class. And of course he did do all right, but he had his own agenda for when to learn and what. And Nancy, you know, they did well in school, and she was a sportsman. The kids didn't. Well, Randy, he could walk, but because of his back, his spina bifida, but he didn't do well racing or anything like that. And Jim just didn't care much for sports, you know, so we didn't go to games and cheer them on like that. And then Jim, I think, got a scholarship. He went to USC. And Randy went to Fullerton there for a while. And Nancy started nurses training there, and then came back to Tulsa. And Karen always did well in school.
Anything else that the kids did that you can think of that accomplishments, or not just school, outside of school, that you enjoyed watching them do or go?
Nancy and Randy sang, you know, and I enjoyed their singing so much. And Jim had a little trouble carrying a tune.
Yeah, you can tell about it, Ruth, if you want to.
This spittoon belonged to my great-grandfather, Anthony C. Wheeler, and it was with them when they came from Illinois to Kansas around 1874 in a covered wagon, and it doesn't have a chip on it or anything, and so we took it to an antique place, and they said that it is rare because it's spongeware. They did the decorations with a sponge, and that it would be worth around $150 or something.
Mm-hmm. What do you remember when you see it, when it was used? Did you see it used, or where was it when you remember seeing it?
In the old cabinet, what would that be called, where I've got the dishes and the desk.
Mm-hmm. But when you were a child, do you remember seeing this when you were a child?
It was in there.
It was just in. It was already an heirloom when you were a child.
They were being careful with it.
Tell me about each one of these objects, then, Ruth. Go ahead.
This belonged to Grandma Googleman, and I thought it was pretty, the little boy feeding the sheep. And I don't remember for sure if it was this or another little one that Grandpa Bolliger always kept his shaving brush in, you know. And
Who is Grandma Googleman?
Googleman was Grandpa Bolliger's wife's mother.
Mm-hmm.
So.
What else do you have there?
And this was my grandma's, and she always kept toothpicks in it. And I just hadn't, I know it's real old, but I don't know if it has any value.
What was her name?
Anna Davis.
Anna Davis.
Anna Voss Davis.
Anna Voss Davis. And you can remember her putting toothpicks in it?
Mm-hmm.
Hold it up just a little bit. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And this was hers, and some antique dealer said there's a little value to it. I don't remember what it was. Soup bowl belonged to Anna Voss Davis, Clara Wheeler's mother. And I guess I don't know whether there's many ironstone dishes anymore or not, or how they were made, but that's old.